This is my true story. I never thought these words would come from my own blood. My son looked me in the eye and said, "You're not my father, just a beggar in my house." He laughed, and his wife nodded in agreement. My chest felt heavy, my hands shook, but I stayed quiet that night. I worked all my life for him, yet he spit on my name in my own home. But I was not powerless. I stood up, and you won't believe what I did next. Before that, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. I was not born rich. I was born with nothing in my hands but strength in my body. From the time I was young, I worked in fields, in factories, on roads, anywhere I could earn a coin. Every morning I woke before the sun, and every night I came home long after it had set. My hands became rough, my back bent, and my body tired, but I never complained. I told myself, this work is not for me. This work is for my son. When he was a boy, I gave him everything I could. If there was one piece of bread, I gave it to him. If there was one blanket, I covered him with it and slept cold myself. I wore shoes with holes in them, but I saved to buy him new ones. I carried heavy loads on my shoulders, but I made sure his shoulders were light. I went without, so he never had to. When school fees came, I found a way. Sometimes I borrowed, sometimes I worked double shifts, sometimes I skipped meals to save the money. But I paid. I wanted him to learn, to grow, to have a future better than mine. When he passed exams, I smiled with pride, though he never saw the tears in my eyes, because I knew each grade was built on my sweat. When he grew older, I still stood by him. He wanted a wedding. I sold my savings. He wanted a house. I helped lay the bricks with my own hands, though my back ached with every lift. He fell into debts. I covered them, even though it drained me. I told myself, he is young. He will learn. He will change. He will one day look back and see what I gave him. I believed my sacrifices were building a bond. I believed love would return love. I believed respect would return respect. I thought, one day, when I am old and weak, he will give me a chair to sit, a warm meal to eat, and kind words to hear. That was my dream. That was the hope that kept me going when my body begged me to stop. I remember nights when I came home with nothing in my pocket. My stomach empty, my hands shaking from long hours, but I still smiled at him and gave him what little I had. I remember birthdays when I saved coins for weeks just to buy him a toy, a cake, or a small gift. The joy in his face then was enough to erase my pain. I thought those memories would last forever. But time changes people. Somewhere along the way, my son forgot. He forgot the nights I stayed awake when he was sick. He forgot the days I walked miles just to buy his medicine. He forgot the hours I worked so he could study. He forgot that every step of his life was paid with my sweat, my hunger, my broken body. Still, I believed. Still, I hoped. I told myself, maybe he is busy. Maybe he will remember later. Maybe love is still there, hidden. I swallowed the pain of his sharp words, thinking one day he would soften. I ignored the pride in his voice, hoping one day he would show kindness. I stayed silent, thinking silence was love. But silence is heavy when it is not returned. Silence becomes chains, and the chains grew tighter each year. The boy I raised was no longer a boy. He was a man with a hard heart, and I was left waiting for love that never came. And still, I told myself, I gave him everything. He will not forget forever. Cruelty does not always come like a storm. Sometimes it comes like a small wind, so soft at first that you almost miss it. That is how it started with my son. At first, it was just small things. A tone in his voice, a sigh, a roll of the eyes. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself he was tired from work, stressed from life. But deep down, those small things were the first cracks in the wall between us. The first time I noticed it, I had dropped a spoon while eating. My hand shook, and it slipped from my fingers onto the floor. Instead of picking it up, instead of smiling and helping me, he snapped, "Can't you even hold a spoon?" "You're useless." His wife laughed quietly at his side. I forced a smile, pretending not to hear the words, but inside my heart trembled. Later, he mocked my walk. My legs are not strong. My knees ache with every step. I cannot climb stairs quickly anymore. Instead of helping me, instead of giving me his arm, he smirked and said, "Look at you. You walk like an old stick about to break." His words were sharp, but what hurt more was the joy he took in saying them. At meals, I ate slowly. My teeth are weak, and I need more time. Instead of patience, he tapped the table with his fingers, annoyed. "Hurry up. You eat like a child." I remembered the nights I fed him spoon by spoon, cutting his food into small pieces so he would not choke. I remembered carrying him on my back when he was too tired to walk. And now, he mocked me for the same weakness he once had. He stopped calling me father. He started calling me old man, sometimes even burden. The first time he said it, I froze. It felt like my heart stopped beating. But I told myself he was only joking. I told myself, he does not mean it. But the words kept coming, each one cutting deeper than the last. At family gatherings, he began making me the joke. "Don't mind him," he would say to relatives. "He forgets everything. His memory is gone." Everyone laughed. I forced myself to laugh too, but I felt like I was breaking into pieces. I wanted to remind them that this brain, this memory, once carried numbers, debts, bills, and lessons so that he could study, so that he could live. But I stayed silent. When neighbors came, he showed no respect. He never asked me to sit with them. He never introduced me with pride. Instead, he spoke to them as if I were invisible, or worse, as if I were only a weight he had to carry. I sat in the corner, listening, pretending I did not care, but each time, my heart sank lower. The sharpest wound was his silence. When I tried to speak to him, to tell him stories of my youth, to share memories of his childhood, he waved his hand and said, "Stop. I don't have time for this." The stories that kept me alive, the memories that gave me comfort, were nothing to him. He cut them short like they had no meaning. Day by day, the distance grew. Day by day, the respect faded. I prayed at night, whispering to God, "Please soften his heart. Please let him remember the sacrifices I hoped each morning would bring change." But instead, each morning brought more coldness. I endured in silence. I told myself this was a phase. I told myself he would one day look back, one day remember. But the truth was already showing itself. The first signs of cruelty had appeared. They were no longer drops. They were becoming streams, and I was drowning in them. Words can be heavier than stones. They do not leave bruises on the skin, but they crush the heart from inside. For me, the words came one night after dinner. The room was quiet. The plates were still on the table. I had eaten slowly, as I always do, and I thought the night was calm. But then his voice cut through the silence like a knife. He looked me in the eyes, cold and hard, and said, "You're not my father. You're just a beggar in my house." The world stopped. I could not breathe. My ears rang. For a moment, I thought I had heard him wrong. How could the child I raised, the son I carried on my shoulders, the boy whose tears I wiped, say these words to me? My lips trembled. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. His wife was sitting nearby. Instead of stopping him, instead of showing shame, she laughed softly and nodded. That laugh broke me even more. It was not just my son rejecting me. It was the house rejecting me. The home I built with my own hands had turned into a prison of shame. He repeated the words again, louder this time, as if he wanted them to burn into my mind. "You are nothing. Not a father, not a man. Just a beggar eating my food, sleeping under my roof." Every word was like a whip. My chest tightened. My eyes filled with tears. I thought of the past. I thought of the times I worked 2 jobs so he could study. I thought of the nights I walked home in the rain, shoes soaked, stomach empty, just so I could bring him milk. I thought of the mornings I stood in long lines to buy him books. And now he stood in front of me, calling me a beggar. I looked at my hands. They were shaking. These were the same hands that once held his tiny fingers when he learned to walk. The same hands that built the walls of the house he now claimed as his own. And yet, to him, They were the hands of a beggar. My body ached, but my soul ached more. I wanted to ask him, "If I am a beggar, who gave you life? Who gave you food? Who gave you the roof above your head?" But my throat was locked. My pain was too heavy to let words out. He smirked at my silence. He thought he had won. He thought his cruelty had broken me completely. His wife looked at me with eyes full of scorn, as if I were dirt under her feet. Together, they stood united in their contempt. That night, I could not sleep. His words echoed in my head again and again. Not my father. Just a beggar. I closed my eyes, but the sentence was carved into the darkness. I sat on the bed, shaking, clutching my chest. I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. I remembered when he was young, when he would come running to me after falling, crying, "Father, hold me." I remembered when he said I was his hero, when he looked at me with pride. Where had that boy gone? Where had that love disappeared? In its place was only a man full of anger and poison. The cruel words did not just insult me. They tried to erase me. They tried to erase the years of sacrifice, the nights of hunger, the endless hours of labor. They tried to rewrite history, making me nothing but a shadow in his story. But deep inside, I knew the truth. I was his father. I would always be his father. And no words could erase that. Still, the pain of that night burned me. It left scars not on my skin, but in my heart. Scars that no medicine could heal. I cried quietly, where no one could see, because I did not want the world to know how broken I was. That night, the cruel words became my chains. They bound me to sorrow. But they also planted something else, a spark of resolve. I did not know it then, but those words, meant to destroy me, would become the very reason I stood up later. They would push me to seek justice. They would drive me to the courtroom, where his cruelty would be exposed. Because words can wound, but truth can heal. And I would no longer let his voice define me. After the words came the hands. Cruel words can crush the heart, but fists break the body. I thought his insult was the worst pain I could ever feel. But I was wrong. Because after calling me a beggar, my son showed me how deep his cruelty truly was. It started with small things, a shove here, a push there. He would grab my arm too hard, leaving red marks. He would slap the back of my head when I walked too slowly, laughing as if it were a joke. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself maybe he was stressed. I told myself I could endure it. But every time I forgave him, he grew bolder. Every time I stayed silent, he grew stronger in his cruelty. One evening, it went too far. I was sitting in the living room chair, my legs weak, my back aching. He came in, angry about something small. Maybe the way I had placed the dishes. Maybe the way I breathed too loudly. His anger was a storm. Without warning, his hand struck my face. The sting burned across my cheek. Before I could even react, another slap followed. Then another. My head snapped from side to side. My ears rang. My vision blurred. I tried to raise my hands to protect myself, but my arms were too slow, too frail. He grabbed me by the collar and shoved me against the wall. My shoulder hit the hard surface, sending pain shooting through my bones. He slapped me again, harder this time. My face swelled under his palm. My lips split. I tasted blood. His wife stood in the doorway, watching. She did not try to stop him. She crossed her arms and smiled. That smile cut me deeper than the blows. Together, they made me feel like less than human. Like trash. The beating did not stop there. Some nights, when he was angry, he would push me to the floor. My knees bruised, my ribs ached, but he did not care. He enjoyed watching me struggle to stand. Other nights, he would punch my chest, leaving me gasping for air. Once, he even kicked me while I was down, his foot landing hard against my side. The pain was sharp, but the shame was sharper. I hid my bruises under long sleeves. I lied to neighbors who asked about the marks. I fell, I said. I tripped. I thought I was protecting my son, but I was only protecting his cruelty. My silence was the shield he used to keep hitting me. At night, I would sit alone, staring at my swollen face in the mirror. I could barely recognize the man staring back. My eyes were puffy. My skin was purple and red. My lips cracked and bleeding. I would touch my face gently, and tears would fall, not just from the pain, but from the betrayal. I once held this boy in my arms, protecting him from every harm. Now, he was the one hurting me. Sometimes, after the beatings, I would lie awake in bed, clutching my chest, wondering if my heart would give out. I am old. My body is not strong. Every strike felt like it could be the last. I asked myself, is this how my story ends? Beaten in my own house by my own son? But even in the middle of that torment, something inside me refused to die. Every bruise was painful, but it was also a reminder. A reminder that I still lived. A reminder that I still had power. Because pain can weaken the body, but it can also harden the spirit. And with every strike he gave me, my resolve grew. I thought back to the years when I carried him on my shoulders. I thought back to when he was sick as a child, and I stayed awake all night, pressing a wet cloth to his forehead, praying for him to get better. I thought of all the nights I worked in factories, lifting heavy loads, sweating until dawn, just to pay his school fees. Every sacrifice I made was out of love. And this is what he gave me in return: fists, bruises, and blood. But even as I suffered, I knew something he had forgotten. He thought fists made him strong. He thought pain silenced me. But he forgot the law. He forgot that the world outside these walls had rules. He forgot that I still had the strength to speak. Every bruise on my body was not just pain, it was evidence. Every cut was proof. Every swollen mark was a voice. And one day, I promised myself, those voices would be heard. Not in this house, not in the silence of night, but in front of the judge, where truth has no chains. So I endured. Not because I was weak, but because I was waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for the day when his violence would turn into his downfall. He thought he was breaking me. But in truth, he was building my case. He was writing his own judgment with every slap, every punch, every kick. And one day soon, he would pay. My son thought he was the master. He thought his hands, his kicks, his cruel words gave him all the power. He thought I was nothing but an old man who could not fight back. To him, I was weak, broken, useless. He thought violence made him strong, and silence made me powerless. But he was wrong. So very wrong. Power is not only in fists. Power is not only in loud voices or cruel words. Real power hides in quiet places. Real power is in truth. Real power is in paper, in proof, in law. And he forgot that. He forgot that the house where he mocked me was not his. Every brick, every wall, every piece of land was mine. The name on the deed was mine. He lived under my roof, but he acted as if I was the guest. He forgot that the food he ate came from my work. He forgot that the bed he slept in was bought by me. He forgot that the car he drove was once given by me. He forgot that his whole life had been built on my sacrifices. He called me a beggar. But tell me, how can the owner of the house be a beggar? How can the man who paid for his school, his wedding, his debts be a beggar? The truth was clear. The beggar was him. Without me, he had nothing. Without me, he was just an arrogant man with empty pockets and cruel hands. He forgot another truth. Bruises do not fade in silence anymore. In today's world, bruises speak. They speak to doctors. They speak to neighbors. They speak to police. He thought hiding me in shame would keep his cruelty secret. But every mark on my skin was a story he could not erase. Every cut was a letter. Every swollen cheek was a sentence. My body was a book, and one day the judge would read it. He also forgot that people were watching. Neighbors had seen his temper. Relatives had whispered about his arrogance. Some had even heard the shouting through the walls. He thought fear kept me alone, but the truth was, witnesses were all around us. He forgot that even walls talk when the truth is strong enough. And more than that, he forgot who I was. I am his father. The man who raised him from nothing. The man who stayed awake at night when he was sick, praying for him. The man who worked 2 jobs, sweating in the sun, shivering in the rain, just to buy him a future. I may be old, my hands may shake, my body may ache, but I am not nothing. I am not weak. I am not a beggar. He forgot that age is not defeat. Age is memory, and my memory holds every detail of his cruelty. Every word he spoke, I remembered. Every strike he gave me, I counted. I was not only surviving his abuse, I was gathering proof of it, proof that no lie could cover, proof that no denial could erase. He thought he had broken me. He thought I was too weak to fight. But what he did not see was the fire building inside me. Quiet fire. Patient fire. The kind of fire that does not burn quickly, but waits for the right moment to destroy everything. I knew my time would come. Not in his kitchen, not in his living room, not in the dark, where only he and his wife could laugh at me. My time would come in the open, in the light of justice, where truth is louder than fists. He forgot about the law. The law does not care about his arrogance. The law does not fear his fists. The law only looks at proof, at facts, at truth. And I had all three. My bruises were proof. My words were facts. My life was truth. He could hit me again and again, but each hit only added to my case. Each strike only built his own prison. The real beggar was him. He begged for respect, but he gave none. He begged for power, but he had none. He begged for control, but he forgot the simplest truth. The father he mocked was the same father who could end him. And that became my strength. Every time he mocked me, I thought of the papers in my drawer, the deeds, the documents, the proof of ownership. Every time he hit me, I thought of the law that would not stay silent. Every time he laughed at my pain, I thought of the day when he would not laugh, when he would stand trembling before a judge, his pride gone, his arrogance crushed. He thought I was powerless, but the truth is, I was patient. I was waiting. And when the time came, he would see that the man he called Beggar was the man who held his whole fate in his hands. That night, I sat alone in my room. My body was weak, my skin was bruised, but my mind was sharper than ever. I looked in the mirror. The man in the glass had wrinkles, swollen cheeks, and tired eyes. But behind those tired eyes, there was a fire. A fire that pain could not kill. A fire that shame could not bury. For years I stayed silent. I told myself, he will change. He will remember the love I gave him. I told myself to forgive. I told myself to endure. I thought silence was strength, but I was wrong. Silence was not strength. Silence was his weapon. Every time I stayed quiet, he grew bolder. Every time I forgave, he struck harder. Every time I endured, he mocked me more. That night, I understood one thing. Silence was no longer an option. If I stayed silent, he would not stop. He would not change. He would not regret. He would only grow crueler, until one day I would not be alive to tell my story. That thought broke me, but it also built me. I realized the only way forward was action. I thought of all the years I worked, the hours under the hot sun, the nights in the cold rain, the meals I skipped just to save a coin. All of that sacrifice I gave for him. And this was my return? To be slapped, to be shoved, to be called a beggar in my own house? Number. This was not how my story would end. I made a decision that was final, sharp, and clear. I would not fight him with fists. I would not curse him back with words. I would fight him with truth. I would fight him with proof. I would fight him in a place where his laughter would mean nothing. I would fight him in court. That night I swore to myself, enough is enough. Tomorrow begins the end of his cruelty. My heart was heavy, but it was also strong. I knew it would not be easy. To take a son to court is like cutting your own flesh. The pain is deep. The shame is heavy. People would whisper. Relatives would talk. Neighbors would judge. They would say, how can a father take his son to court? But I also knew those same people had seen my pain. They had seen my bruises. They had heard the shouts. They had turned their eyes away, but their hearts knew the truth. And I told myself, I do not care about whispers. I do not care about shame. I care about justice. I care about dignity. I thought of the judge. I thought of the courtroom. I imagined myself standing there, my hands shaking, my voice trembling, but my truth shining brighter than his lies. I imagined the silence when I spoke. I imagined the weight of my words falling on his head like stones. I imagined his face when the judge looked at him, not as a son, but as a criminal. That thought gave me peace. That thought gave me courage. I also thought of my wife, long gone from this world. I imagined her eyes watching me from above. Would she want me to suffer in silence? Would she want me to die in shame? Number. She would want me to fight. She would want me to rise. She would want me to protect the honor of the life we built together. And so I whispered into the night. This fight is not just for me. This fight is for her too. My decision was set. I would go to the police. I would gather proof. I would call witnesses. I would collect every bruise, every scar, every cruel word, and turn them into weapons of truth. I would no longer be his victim. I would be his accuser. I would no longer be the weak man he mocked. I would be the man who broke his pride in front of the world. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my chair, holding my walking stick, staring at the door. My son thought he had locked me inside his cruelty. But in truth, he had opened the door to his own downfall. My decision was made, and nothing could break it. Not fear, not shame, not love. Yes, he was my son. Yes, I once loved him with all my heart. But love does not mean silence. Love does not mean letting yourself be destroyed. Love is not slavery. A son who beats his father is no son. A son who mocks his father is no son. A son who calls his father a beggar is no son. And so I told myself, I have no son. I only have an enemy, and this enemy will face justice. That night, for the first time in years, I felt free. Free from fear. Free from silence. Free from shame. The decision was made, and nothing could stop me. Tomorrow, I would begin. Tomorrow, I would walk into the light of justice. Tomorrow, I would no longer be the man mocked in his own house. Tomorrow, I would be the man who stood in court and told the truth. And in that truth, my revenge would live. The next morning, I woke with a heavy body but a strong mind. My legs hurt, my arms ached. The bruises on my skin burned with every move. But I did not hide them. I looked at them in the mirror and whispered, "These are not just wounds. These are proof." My pain was no longer only pain, it was now my weapon. I knew the first step was to gather everything I could. No one would believe just my words. Words can be denied, words can be twisted, but proof cannot be erased. Proof is stronger than lies. Proof is the wall that no one can break, and I would build that wall brick by brick until my son's cruelty was trapped inside it forever. I took out an old bag and began to place things inside. The first was a small notebook. In that notebook, I had written down dates. Dates when he had shouted at me. Dates when he had slapped me. Dates when he had pushed me. I wrote them all, even when the pain made my hands tremble. At that time, I did not know why I wrote them. I only knew I had to. Now I understood. That notebook was my first stone of evidence. Next, I needed pictures. With my shaking hands, I took a camera and stood in front of the mirror. I clicked photo after photo of my face, my arms, my ribs. Each bruise shone dark and ugly, but to me, they shone bright with power. Every mark was proof of his hands. Every cut was proof of his violence. Every picture was a weapon. I placed them carefully in the bag. Then I remembered the hospital. Weeks before, after one of his cruel attacks, I had gone to a doctor. At that time, I told the doctor I had fallen. I was ashamed to admit the truth. But still, the doctor had written a report. Bruises, swelling, broken skin. Now that report became gold in my hands. I searched my drawer until I found it. My eyes filled with tears. This was no longer just paper. This was the voice of a witness who did not know he was a witness. I also thought of the neighbors. They had seen things. They had heard shouts. They had seen me lying on the ground, unable to rise. They had turned away in silence, but they could not erase what they saw. I went to their doors, one by one. At first, they looked down, ashamed. But when I told them I was going to court, some finally spoke. One neighbor signed a statement. Another wrote a note saying he had seen my son strike me. Their words became part of my wall of proof. I even found old messages. On nights when he was drunk, my son would send me cruel texts. "Old beggar," he wrote, "you are nothing." At that time, those words cut me like a knife. Now, they cut him instead. I printed them out and added them to the pile. Slowly, my bag grew heavy. Not with food, not with clothes, but with truth. Each piece of paper, each photo, each note was weight on his shoulders. The weight he thought I would never carry. When I sat down and looked at all of it, I felt something I had not felt in years. Power. Real power. Not the power of fists. Not the power of shouting. The power of truth. The power of proof. My son had mocked me, saying I was nothing but a beggar in my own house. But now I saw the truth. I was not the beggar. I was the master of his downfall. I placed everything neatly into folders. I wrote on each one: medical proof, photographs, witness, texts. My hands shook, but my mind was steady. For the first time, I was not hiding my pain. I was preparing it for war. That night, I sat with the bag at my feet. I touched it with my hand and smiled. My son thought he had taken everything from me: respect, dignity, even love. But he had given me this: evidence. His own cruelty had created the proof that would destroy him. I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, I go to the police. Tomorrow, I go to the lawyer. Tomorrow, I begin the case." The bag was heavy, but my heart was light. For the first time in years, I felt like I was no longer walking alone. My bruises walked with me. My scars walked with me. My proof walked with me. Together, we would face him. Together, we would end him. And so, I closed my eyes. My body ached, but my spirit rested. The evidence was ready. The truth was ready. Justice was waiting. The day of court arrived. My body was weak, but my will was strong. I wore my old coat, the same coat I once wore when I took my son to school as a child. That coat had seen many winters, but none colder than the heart of the boy I raised. With my bag of evidence in one hand and my walking stick in the other, I entered the courtroom. My steps were slow, but each one felt like a drumbeat of justice. The room was large, with high walls and cold lights. The judge sat above us, his face calm but firm. Lawyers shuffled papers, people whispered. My son sat across from me. He wore a fine suit, his hair combed back, his face proud. But I could see the flicker in his eyes. For the first time, he was not in control. For the first time, he was not the master. He was the one being judged. I sat down, my hands trembling, but not with fear. They trembled with memory. I remembered the night he called me a beggar. I remembered the times he shoved me, slapped me, bruised me. I remembered lying in silence, thinking I was powerless. And now I was here, sitting across from him, ready to speak. The judge asked me to begin. My lawyer nodded. My heart pounded, but I stood. My voice cracked at first, weak like old wood. But then it grew. I told the court my story. I told them how I worked every day of my life, from sunrise to sunset, to feed my son. I told them how I built a home, not just of bricks, but of sacrifice. I told them how I gave him education, money, even respect, and in return, he gave me pain. Then I opened my bag. The courtroom grew silent. I pulled out the first folder. Photographs. One by one, I showed them. The pictures of my face, my arms, my ribs, covered in bruises. Some gasped. Some shook their heads. The judge leaned forward, his eyes sharp. My son shifted in his seat. His smile was gone. Next came the medical reports. The doctor's notes, the x-rays, the words written in black and white. Bruises, swelling, injury consistent with assault. I handed them to the court. My lawyer read them aloud. Each word hit my son like a hammer. Then I brought out the witness notes. Neighbors who had seen him shout, who had seen him push me, who had seen me fall. Their words were simple, but strong. They spoke of nights filled with noise, of mornings when they found me limping. They had turned away before, but now they stood with me. Finally, I pulled out the printed texts. The messages where my son called me beggar, worthless, nothing. The judge read them silently. The courtroom grew colder. My son looked down, his hands shaking. His pride, once loud, was now silent. When I finished, I placed the bag down. My voice was tired, but my eyes were clear. I pointed at my son. I did not shout. I did not curse. I only said the truth. This is my son. The man who said I am not his father. The man who said I am a beggar. The man who struck me, bruised me, and left me in shame. This is the man who forgot the hands that once fed him. This is the man who forgot the love that once carried him. The judge looked at me for a long time. Then he looked at my son. "Do you deny this?" he asked. My son tried to speak. His words stumbled. "He is lying," he said weakly. But the photos spoke louder. The medical reports spoke louder. The witnesses spoke louder. The texts spoke louder. His lies crumbled under the weight of truth. The lawyer on my side spoke next. He repeated my story, piece by piece, but stronger. He showed the court how every scar matched the dates in my notebook. He showed how every bruise matched the doctor's notes. He showed how every insult matched the texts. The wall of proof stood tall, and my son was trapped inside. When it was over, the judge raised his hand. The room grew quiet. His words came slowly, but they carried weight. "This is abuse," he said. "This is cruelty. This is a crime." His voice echoed in the courtroom. My son lowered his head. His face was pale. His pride was broken. As the judge read the charges, I watched. I did not smile. I did not laugh. I only stood there, silent, with tears in my eyes. Tears not of weakness, but of justice. For years, I carried shame. For years, I carried pain. But in that moment, the shame was no longer mine. It was his. The pain was no longer mine. It was his. The courtroom emptied slowly. People whispered as they passed. Some looked at me with respect. Some looked at my son with disgust. I walked out with my lawyer by my side. My steps were slow, but they were free. For the first time, I felt the weight on my shoulders lift. For the first time, I felt like a father again. Not because of my son, but because I stood for myself. That night I slept without fear. I had stood in court. I had spoken the truth. I had shown the judge my bruises, my scars, my pain, and the world had listened. The courtroom was not just a room. It was the place where I gave my silence a voice. It was the place where I turned my suffering into justice. It was the place where I stopped being a beggar and became a man again. The courtroom had spoken, but the noise did not stop there. News spread quickly. Neighbors who once ignored my bruises now whispered in shame. They had seen me limp. They had seen my son yell, but they stayed silent. Now the truth was written in law, and they could not look away. I walked past them, head high. For years I lowered my eyes, hiding in pain. But now I lifted my chin, and their eyes turned from me to him. My son walked out of court that day in handcuffs. His fine suit no longer made him look powerful. His shoulders slumped, his head hung low. He tried to shout at reporters, saying I lied, saying I was bitter. But the cameras caught more than his words. They caught his fear. They caught his anger. They caught his shame. The man who once called me a beggar now begged for people to believe him. At work, the fallout was even harsher. My son had built an image of respect. He wore nice clothes, spoke loudly, acted as if he was a leader. But when the court papers reached his office, everything collapsed. His boss called him in. The staff gathered in silence, and the truth was read aloud. Elder abuse, assault, cruelty. The hands that once signed reports were the same hands that slapped his father. The mouth that once gave orders was the same mouth that called his father beggar. Colleagues who once laughed at his jokes now turned away. Some shook their heads, some whispered behind his back, some cut him off completely. Soon, the job was gone. The company could not keep a man marked by court records and disgrace. They fired him, and word spread fast. Other jobs closed their doors. Employers said they did not want his name tied to their business. The money he once spent so easily dried up. The car he bought on loans was taken back. The bills stacked high. His house of arrogance fell brick by brick. Relatives reacted too. At first, they did not believe me. Some said, "He would never do this." Some said, "Maybe the old man is confused." But when they saw the photos, the reports, the judge's ruling, their silence ended. They stopped defending him. At family gatherings, his name was spoken in whispers. Some aunts shook their heads, saying, "How could he treat his father like that?" Cousins who once looked up to him now avoided his calls. He became a shadow in his own family tree. The streets were no kinder. Neighbors saw the police car pull up to his home. They saw him dragged out in handcuffs. They saw the shame on his face. Children whispered. Adults crossed the street when he walked by. Once he strutted proudly, calling me weak. Now he walked with his head down, every step heavy with disgrace. He had thrown me to the ground many times, but now the ground swallowed him. He tried to reach me. My phone rang again and again. Calls filled the screen. Sometimes he begged. Sometimes he shouted. Sometimes he cried. But I did not answer. Each ring was a reminder of the nights I lay bruised and silent. Each missed call was justice ringing in my pocket. He had power once, but now I held the silence he feared most. His wife, who once smirked as he mocked me, now stood apart. She feared the stain of his name. She whispered to her friends that she had no part in his actions. But people remembered her laughter. They remembered her silence. She too carried the mark of shame. Soon she left him, taking what little she could. Alone, abandoned, he was left in the same emptiness he once forced on me. The fallout was not just in the outside world. It was inside him. Pride had been his mask. Power had been his weapon. But now, both were gone. He sat in his small room, lights off, debts piling, his name worthless. The man who once raised his hand against me now lowered his head in despair. He who once laughed as I cried now wept with no one listening. For me, life changed too. People who once ignored me now greeted me with respect. Strangers nodded when I passed. Neighbors said, "You are brave." My dignity was not only returned, it was stronger than before. I was no longer the old man who suffered in silence. I was the father who stood in court, who showed the truth, who broke the chain of cruelty. The fallout was a mirror. It showed the world who we both truly were. I was not the beggar he claimed. I was the builder, the provider, the man of sacrifice. He was not the son I raised. He was the abuser, the criminal, the man of shame, and the world finally saw it. Every day I walked past the court building with calm steps. Every day I saw his name in the records. And every day I felt lighter. His cruelty was no longer my burden. It was his sentence. The fallout did not crush me. It crushed him. And in that ruin, I found peace. Justice came slow, but it came strong. For years, I thought silence was my only answer. I thought if I kept my head down, if I accepted the pain, my son might change. But I learned the truth the hard way. Silence does not stop cruelty. It feeds it. Every bruise I hid gave him more power. Every insult I swallowed gave him more pride. But the day I stood in court, everything changed. I used the same truth he feared. And that truth became my weapon. I walked out of court with my back straight. My body was weak, but my spirit was firm. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from fear. Free from shame. Free from the shadow of my own son. People looked at me differently now. Not as a broken old man, not as a beggar, but as a man who stood up and fought back. That respect was worth more than gold. It healed wounds that medicine could not. My son, on the other hand, carried chains heavier than any weight. His name was ruined. His job was gone. His family walked away. His pride, once so loud, was silent. The man who pushed me, slapped me, mocked me, now sat alone. No one wanted to hear him. No one wanted to help him. He begged, but no one listened. That was the justice he earned. Neighbors told me they were proud of me. They said, "You showed us courage." Relatives who once doubted me now kept quiet when my name was spoken. Even strangers respected me. They did not see my wrinkles as weakness anymore. They saw them as marks of survival. Each line on my face told a story of endurance. Each scar on my skin told a story of truth. And people finally listened. I no longer lived in his house. I no longer ate at his table. I built my own peace, small but full of dignity. I ate my meals with respect. I slept in a bed without fear. I woke up each day knowing that my life was mine again, that freedom was my victory. But more than freedom, I gained something greater. I gained justice for every father, every mother, every elder who is treated like nothing by their own children. When I stood in court, I was not only standing for myself, I was standing for all of them. The judge's gavel was not only for me, it was for every old soul who ever cried in silence. That is why my story matters. That is why I tell it. My son's cruelty ended with him. He thought he could break me. But it was he who broke. He thought he could silence me. But it was he who lost his voice. He thought he could erase me. But it was he who was erased from respect, from honor, from family. That is justice, not revenge in secret, not pain returned with pain, but truth, spoken loud, in front of the world. I do not hate him anymore. Hatred is heavy. I carried it for too long. I let it go when I saw him in handcuffs. I let it go when I saw his eyes, once full of arrogance, now filled with fear. That was enough. I did not need to hit back. The law did it for me. The truth did it for me. Justice did it for me. Now I live in peace. I spend my mornings with quiet tea. I watch the sun rise without worry. I walk the streets without shame. People greet me with respect, not pity. That peace is my reward. That peace is my justice. And when I think of my son, I do not think of his laughter when he mocked me. I think of the silence that followed in court. I think of the judge's words. I think of the sound of chains on his wrists. That silence, that gavel, those chains, they were my justice. They were the answer to years of torment. Final thought. He told me, "You're not my father, just a beggar in my house." But I proved him wrong. I stood in court. I showed the judge his violence, and I walked away free. He is the one who rots now, and I am the one who stands tall.